John, super excited to have you join me. I've watched you from afar. I know we have a lot of folks in common, so I'm just excited to be able to spend some time with you. And one of the goals in all the stories that I try to bring on here is partly cover the 0 to 1. Right? I think you and I are both finished products on the internet that people look up to or look into, and they go, I don't get how you get there. So I also like to spend a lot of time in the how did you become who you're most well known for. So if you want to just jump in there, that's where I want to start. And then I have a whole bunch of questions I'd love to unpack with you.
Sure. Well, Leo, thanks for having me. My grandfather's name is actually Leo. I was named after him by my middle name. They just shortened it to Lee. So definitely a hat tip to the word Leo, the name Leo for sure. And listen, I'm just a country boy from the state of Maine. Spent the first 18 years of my life in a very small town. Went to college on an Army scholarship. So I spent 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army. Did a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank commander. That means you're in charge of 4 tanks and 16 men. So I grew up pretty fast in my low 20s. At least had to have a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. And after that, I tried a bunch of different things in the traditional world. I tried corporate finance. I went to law school. I was in commercial and residential real estate for a while. Unfortunately, EXP didn't exist back then, or I probably would still be in real estate. I was stuck with some much less appealing options than EXP. And in 2012, I decided to launch the first daily podcast in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. I called it Entrepreneurs on Fire. It was the best daily show in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily show in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily show in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. And that's kind of one of my themes that I think will come up probably a couple of times today is, how can you dominate a niche? Like that's how winners are made in my experience and in my opinion. And here we are 13 years later, 4,684 episodes later, 170 million listens later. I'm still doing it because I get to talk to cool people like you and Gene and other amazing entrepreneurs in the world that are just doing great things. And I learn from every single one of them. And I have a fun time doing it on my little island of Puerto Rico, where you actually get to keep the money you make, which is kind of hard to believe this day and age, but Puerto Rico, baby, the Enchanted Islands.
And we have quite a few folks from EXP who've made the move over there. And my mom actually attended La Yupi in Puerto Rico and did her undergrad in Puerto Rico. So I do have some familial ties to the island. But let's, you told the early part, and then there's, the 13 years later part. What do you think is probably the thing that people in general just struggle with getting started, right? Because it is undeniable that content creation is a necessity, and I don't care who you are, what you do, how you do it, who your audience is. But I still see so many people get stuck on the how to or how to start, or step one seems to be the hardest one for most people.
It is. The answer is become the number one solution to a real problem in a growing industry. If you can do those 3 things, you're going to win. And a lot of people are like, but I can't become the number one solution. That's too hard. Yes, because you're thinking too broadly. You're thinking of too big of an idea. Think of a big idea. That's where you start. And then you look for what's that niche within that big idea that's not being maximized, that's being overlooked, that's undiscovered for any number of reasons. EXP did that in the real estate world. Real estate's a huge. Everybody and their mother can be a real estate agent, like literally, and that's boring. I've been there. I've done that. What did EXP do? They found a way to make it interesting. They found a way to make people excited about being part of that company. They exploited a niche that other companies weren't willing to look into or exploit, and they've dominated as a result. And you can do the exact same thing as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. You just have to find that thing. I mean, Leo, my big idea was a podcast, but that's a pretty broad topic. So what about a business podcast? Okay, there were 800 business podcasts back in 2012. Now there's tens of thousands. Okay, well, what about an interview podcast of entrepreneurs? Okay, there's 9 of those. That's kind of more interesting as I continue to niche down. But do I really want to be the 10th most popular or successful interview podcast of entrepreneurs? That's not interesting. Well, what are they doing? Or more importantly, what are they not doing that I can possibly do, that I can dive into, that I can exploit as a niche. And it came down to quantity. They were doing once a week, twice per month. That's great. But what if I did 2 a week? What if I did 4 a week? Wait, what if I did 7 days a week? And so that was what I did. I exploited the quantity niche because my show was not quality when I started. I was a terrible host. I was a terrible speaker. I was terrible at all the things, but I put in the reps. I did it every single day. I was the only show doing it. And here I am 13 years later with the scars to prove it.
So the interesting thing is, so you touched on EXP. One of the early things that Glenn, the founder, thought of was, if I can get 5% of all the agents to get interested, I just created a very interesting business, right? And I think that's the part that I think people miss when you go after an opportunity, right? Like, you don't need to get it all. You just need to get enough for it to become super interesting for you. And so when you just describe that process on content creation, what I'm curious to separate in your mind is, you've turned in content creation into the business itself. And when you talk to entrepreneurs, how should they think through of the differences of using the content creation to leverage the business, right? I think most people that probably follow you and are part of your community are probably looking for, how do I take this medium of human connection to leverage the business that I'm in?
The thought that always has to be going through the minds of the person who's creating content is, how is this immediately and directly adding value to the person who's listening, to the consumer of this content? So many people say, this is the show that I want to create, and they go and they create it, and they forget the part of, well, you need people to listen to it. You need people to want to listen to it, to keep listening to it, to tell their friends to listen to it. And to do that, you have to become the number one solution to a real problem. And like, when you do that, you win. Like, I have friends that have launched podcasts, and their only thing they talk about is, and I'm just going to make this up now because there's a million different examples I could give, but it's like, how to heal your kidney. Like, that's one podcast. That podcast wins because anybody who has an ill kidney is going to watch that podcast, is going to listen to that content, because that's all you care about. When you have a failing kidney, all you care about is consuming content that's going to help you get one step closer to healing that kidney. And that can be for anything. What about if you want, to do a podcast on yoga? Well, there's a million podcasts on yoga. What else is interesting about what your passions are? Well, what if you're also a vegan? Okay, now that might be more interesting, that you're going to start the Yogi Vegan podcast or the Vegan Yogi podcast. And now, guess what? Anybody who's a vegan who also is interested in yoga, are they going to watch just the yoga podcast or just no, they're going to go to your podcast because you're providing the best solution to their problems, which is wanting to learn yoga while also being a vegan, and how you can marry those two lifestyles together. And again, these are just one of a million examples of anything. Like, what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? Okay, that's not enough, because that might just be a hobby. Leo likes to spearfish. If he created a podcast on spearfishing, it might not succeed because that's a hobby. Is that really adding value to people? Well, it could, if he also has the other equation, which is, what skills, what knowledge, what value are you adding to the world? That has to be combined in there. Excitement, passion, enthusiasm, skills, knowledge, value. You marry those two together, it's called your zone of fire. That's where your podcast, your content creation has to live. So if all of a sudden Leo's like, okay, you need to use this kind of a tip and this kind of retraction, and like, you fish, you go in these waters and you go to this depth. Now there's some real value there. Now people might be interested in just having him regale us of stories of going out, and it's just not going to be something that spear fishermen are going to find exciting, because they need that value add to their life as well. So whenever you're doing that content creation, always be saying to yourself, what value are my listeners getting in this moment in time? Because, man, they have a million places to go. They have a million shows they could be watching, a million places they could be consuming their content. You have to deliver value at all times.
So the next kind of thought that comes to mind hearing you say that is, how do you advise? And again, you've built a business around it itself, right? And I think that whether it's social or podcasting, it's the attention economy we live in today, is the way to get the eyeballs, right? No one's going to billboards and opening up paper mail these days. Um, How do you marry the, to quote maybe Gary Vaynerchuk, the um, jab, jab before the hook, right? Like, do you give all your best stuff away? Do you, what's the kind of the funnel process, right? And maybe let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of that. I'll tell you how I think about it first, just to see where my thought process is. Like, I act as if I'm already your CEO if you're in real estate. Like, I give away a lot of speaking. I open source a lot of forms, and I give, and I try not to gatekeep. How do you like the I'm assuming the person creating the podcast about healing the kidney could be a doctor or a specialist or someone who's got a product or service to help with that, but they're giving away the content as well. Walk me through how people should think about that value creation, and what is there gatekeeping? Is there something behind a paywall? How do you think through that?
So when Gary's talking about jab, 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 right hook, which by the way was like a 2014 book, but it's just as relevant today as it was then. He's talking about how are you building know, like, and trust? How are you building those three things? Because if I just flip on and I just see Leo and he's got a tiger in the background and he's talking about real estate, I'm probably flipping away. But if I flip it on and then I see CEO of EXP Realty and I know EXP and I know that EXP is legit. And then I see, Leo, he's there and he's just giving real value at that moment in time that I'm listening to him. He might buy 5 more seconds from me. And then those 5 seconds might buy 30 more seconds. Those 30 seconds might buy the rest of the video. And that rest of the video is when then he gives his call to action at the end that maybe gets me on his email list. And then that email list nurtures me into maybe joining one of his masterminds. And that mastermind might lead me to being on one of his live calls and asking him a question. And then I'm like, oh, I'm interacting with Leo live. And that's crazy. And then Leo builds up my know, like, and trust even more by doing that. So now he's throwing a live event in Miami. And I'm like, well, man, I know Leo's legit because I've been in a live call with him and he's answered my question and I've consumed a lot of his content. You go to the live event, and then you're at the live event and he, offers $100,000, whatever it might be. Like, it's just, that's the process. Like, that's how it goes. It's that first second you have the opportunity to catch their attention. You use the word attention economy. Every second it's got to become exponential to the next multiple seconds to minutes to then the next step in the process again, which could be an email, which could be a Facebook group. It's down that funnel until you actually have an opportunity to give that right hook that Gary talks about, of course, in his book. So how are you building know, like, and trust? Like, what are you doing within your content to do that, in a very quick and efficient manner? Like, you brought up the fact that, maybe it's going to have, a doctor is talking about the kidney. Absolutely. Like, that's huge. Like, what if it was like how to form an LLC? Well, if it's a lawyer who's giving that information, that's going to come with a lot more initial importance than if it's just, some guy in a tank top that's kind of walking on the beach. So thinking about those processes and as you're building out your content creation strategy, always keeping that in mind with that kind of mentality of jab, 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 and then right hook.
Talk to me how you recommend the 0 to 1 process, right? So historically speaking, I feel like I've been directionally accurate with some shifts in the world early on in my career. The one that I was aware of because I had friends who started creating content when you did, like they said, this is the future. Like, the probably the since we referenced him one, I'll give him another shout. In 2008, right? There's that famous YouTube video on Gary just screaming into a camera going, this is the future. There's no hiding who you are. We're all going to be a brand of one, right? And I have a couple friends who actually started creating content back then and like have turned it into an entire media business now. So I don't think anyone's confused that this is the future, right? Where I would say, even as an individual and as a leader, it was like, I'm not good at it, all the storytelling. But one of the reasons I create content like this is because this format is very natural for me, right? We're having a conversation. I get to meet interesting people like you and learn a lot about you. But at the same time, then the team can chop up clips of me or you. And then, we one good podcast can turn into like 30 posts on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, across all the different mediums. How do you advise people to start, right? Where going back to that super tactical, right? Like whenever I'm in front of agents and they're like, well, how do I do this? I'm like, well, where are you at first? Like if you've hold 0 homes, like you don't need CRM. You don't need a business card. You need to go talk to humans, right? Like I don't care if it's knocking on doors, cold calling, go sit at the Starbucks, but like if you have 0 pending transactions, you just need to be in conversations because in 6 months you probably need to go get a job if you can't figure it out. Um, how and by the way, who needs to be creating content? Is it purely entrepreneurs, or in this attention economy, is it employees? Is it everybody? Like how do you view that?
Well, I'll start with the ends question you just asked. And the answer is I don't think everybody needs to be creating content at all. In fact, I think most people should probably not be creating content because there's a lot better ways to spend your time than creating content if you don't have a plan in place. So to take a step back for somebody that's like, I have a certain plan in place now, I say you start with a big idea. Like, what is your overarching big idea? That's where you have to start. And excuse me, then within that big idea, as you study it, and this is again, you can use AI these days to really uncover some things. Like I love taking a big idea, putting it into Chat GPT and say, hey, give me 50 niches within this big idea. Because that I'm not saying you choose even one of those niches, but it gets the juices flowing. And maybe one of those 50 niches ends up being something that's really interesting to you, or maybe one of them gives you an idea of another one that's not even on that list that's really interesting and exciting to you. So big idea, discover the niche within that big idea that's interesting to you. And then the next step that we haven't talked about yet is you have to create your avatar. Now, what's an avatar? Avatar is the ideal consumer of your content. Who is that one individual that's that you are literally speaking to? You're looking into the camera, you're speaking to the microphone, however it is you're creating content, you're typing on a keyboard for a newsletter or a Substack post that they're going to read. Who is that person? I, back in 2012, created a 500 word just essay on my avatar, whose name is Jimmy. He's 45 years old. He has a wife and 2 kids, ages 3 and 5. I could go on about Jimmy forever because whenever I came to a fork in the road of how to take my business, Entrepreneurs on Fire, should I go down that road or that road, left or right? I'm not making that decision. Like, because I'm not the perfect listener of my podcast. Jimmy's making that decision. My avatar, the ideal listener of my podcast, the ideal consumer of my content. And once you have that avatar, that individual can and should be leading every meaningful decision that you're going to be making going forward. Like that's the process. So if you're really at zero right now, those are your first 3 steps. Identify your big idea. Discover the niche within that big idea that excites you and that's also undiscovered and that you have an opportunity to get value in, and then create your avatar around that. That's steps 1, 2, and 3. Now, of course, I wrote a book. It's called The Common Path to Uncommon Success, the 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. So of course, there's still steps 4 through 17. Like you're not even close to done. But those are your first 3 steps. And then from that point, you can actually continue the process.
So this is a interesting question that I think I'd love your unique perspective on, that I've been kind of ranting about in the last 6 months. So AI is going to eat the world, and there's different variations and interpretations of it. One of the things that I've been saying, and I just got back from Europe, and I addressed a bunch of our international agents. There's a quote I've used for 2 decades, and it's as true today as it was when I landed on the thought process, which is marketers ruin everything, right? By design, right? Like the goal of enterprise, of marketing, of creating a lead is to find an outsized return on dollars or effort, right? Like I make a Google AdWord, $50, I get $150 back, right? Some multiple metric. And effort on time is also a result. You create content, chop it up, distribute it, and X amount of people go into your funnel, raise their hands. And the reason I say marketers ruin everything is our goal is to find that outsized return. But the one thing that I also say is nothing's unique and special. Eventually, like if you're really good at it, somebody else will replicate it, and we become numb to it, right? Go back to the late '90s with email, and Tom Hanks made a movie about it because it was so compelling. And I don't remember the last time I checked my email, right? And then social and ads and banner ads, and like we can see how through every phase. So this is my thought, and I'd love for you to rip it apart, disagree with it, or agree with it. Is we're going through a commodization of every form of communication, written, video, and audio. And what I mean by that is I don't write very well because I'm pretty sure I'm undiagnosed dyslexic, but you know, I were born in the 80s. So like they just said, you can't write well. Right. But all of a sudden now with ChatGPT, I can edit my own words in a very, profound way of communicating. And I can create a volume of content that I was in a medium that I was not proficient at by physical, mental limitations, however you want to call it. Right. Like my Hey Gen Leo avatar is getting really good. Right. And, when we launched this podcast, actually, there was a 30-second intro that's on Instagram if you want to go listen to it. But it was my voice was done in 11 labs. It was written with Leo GPT. We have a Leo internal GPT that has everything I've ever said that we can upload into it. And it sounds just like me, right? So like the team can write an email to the agents and then they say, make it Leo. And it's a shorter, probably more direct version of whatever they wrote. And so I believe that we're about to go through this, moment where like everyone can now do spam levels of communication. And I'm actually betting on human interaction. I'm betting on a resurgence of kind of that town square interaction. And the one proof point I have to that in my mind is even COVID, right? Like there was a moment there where people were like, hey, everything goes virtual, like UPW was virtual and all the events were virtual. And all of a sudden, they opened the doors and we ran back to being a tribal species as soon as we possibly could. My bet is because there's going to be this moment in time where you can create a lot more content all by yourself, and now everyone's this polished version communicators. Like I'm telling my agents, and I'm doubling down on like you need to upskill your human interaction skills. But what are your thoughts? Do you am I crazy? Do you agree, disagree? Like where do you think now that everyone can create content at scale there is no more gatekeeping. There's like, you don't need to be a proficient writer to the degree that, can be enabled by LLMs and others.
So here's the deal. For a long time, people would look at the content creators that were successful, that were at the top of the game, and then they would try to become pale, weak imitations of those individuals. And so you just had a lot of copycats who were, again, being pale, weak imitations of those people that they looked up to and admired. And the problem that those people found is that individuals don't want a pale, weak imitation of somebody else. They want the real, true, authentic version of you. So those individuals who were copying the successful people would have been much better off finding the true, authentic version of what they loved, what they could add value in by going through that process we've been talking about and creating that, besides chasing what they thought was success. And there's actually a great quote by Albert Einstein, which I love, which is try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. And that's the problem you had for a really long time. And you still have it to a large degree is people are chasing success. They see the words, I want to be successful, because they equate success with happiness. They equate success with money. They want to be successful. The problem on the quest to success is that, are you really adding value to the world? And the answer for a lot of people on their quest to success is no. And I was in that boat as well. But when I flipped it on its head and said, I'm not going to chase success anymore, I'm only going to become a person of value, as this Albert Einstein quote dictates, like, let's see how that works out for me. And I created a free daily podcast. So it was just value to the world. That was all it was. That show turned into a, 7-figure plus a year business success, but because I led with value. So now, fast forward, here you have, AI who can speak like you, who can write like you, who can speak better than you, who can write better than you, who can do all the things, and they can be everywhere. Now, how are you going to stand out from that? Well, the answer is just like you were intimating. How do we now take it down to the ground level? Like, how do we start having in real life interactions? How do we start doing things that AI cannot do? How do we start bringing back that kind of tribal, just community aspect that we lost during COVID, and B, we could be losing during the AI revolution here. So that's where now the playing field is being leveled, because now, some 12-year-old introverted, shy, awkward kid in his mother's basement, which, nothing against that individual, by the way, that could be an amazing human. I'm just describing their traits because I was there once. But now that person can just type words or prompts into AI and now have a video podcast that looks unbelievably realistic, that's better than mine, that I took 2 hours to create and built out a studio that cost me $25,000. Like, there used to be a barrier to entry. Like, you used to have to be good at your craft. You used to have to actually, like, turn a video camera on, have lighting, have a microphone, invest in yourself, invest time and effort in the skills. Like, that's all being wiped away now. So how do you take that knowledge and now start to go in a direction that is now that niche that's not being dominated? And that is what you're mentioning. It's in real life. It's events. It's being on the ground. It's shaking people's hand. It's connecting with people. It's being live on a one-on-one call with them or a one-to-few call with them. Like, that's the direction that content creators are going to have to go.
Give me some off the cuff predictions. What do you think shifts for content creators in the next 12, 24, 36 months?
I think it starts becoming way more niche. Like, it's been trending that way now ever since I've been in the industry, since 2012. So for 13 years, it's been a very slow slide from like a broad podcast about sports or comedy or business. Like, those used to work because there weren't that many of them. And then over time, the professionals started coming into the space of podcasting and YouTube videos and other things, and creating incredible content. So you had to kind of start differentiating yourself more and more and more. So to me, that's where we're continuing to go, but just now at a much faster rate. Like, like, if I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire in 2025,
By the way, that was going to be my next question. So
yeah,
just
with my skill level of 2012, it fails terribly because it doesn't have a chance. So, I mean, people that are launching these type of shows in 2025, they don't have a chance. But the people do have a chance that are saying, this is the one problem that I'm going to create the best solution to in a growing industry. And by the way, use AI like to create your content ideas and your titles and your descriptions. Like, you might as well, because other people are, but you've really got to try to bring in that human niche element. Like, that's the only way you're going to succeed.
So that was going to be the next question, but would you still do it daily? Would you, like, let's just assume you had the same skill set. And then for fun, answer it with the acquired skill set. I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Who gets good at doing something once a week, 4 times a month, 50 times per year?
Right.
Do you think LeBron James practiced once a week when he was on the up? Of course not. He was in the gym 10 hours a day. Because who wins? People who put in the reps. So if you're not willing to wake up every day and put in the reps, you're not going to get better. And there's people that are putting in the reps every single day, and they're getting exponentially better than you quickly. So you've got to find your thing that you're willing to put the reps in, and then put in the reps.
Where do you see the medium going over the next couple of years? Funny enough, my kids are 8 and 10, and we watch reruns, and we were watching a rerun of some shows from the 90s, and it was funny because they were trying to launch a business, and they went on talk radio. And I look at my wife, I'm like, holy shit, those are podcasts. We've been doing this forever.
Bro, that's
right?
kind of
Like,
funny because that was my
50s and
pitch
70s
when I first started back in 2012. So that's not that long ago. My pitch was like, listen, hey, Leo, I see that you're launching a book, and I know, because it's 2012, that you're looking to go on talk radio. So you're getting up at 4 a.m, you're driving to some radio station, and you're on the air, talking to who knows how many people, maybe a lot, maybe a little, as they're commuting to work. Or You can wake up tomorrow at 9 a.m., pour yourself a cup of coffee, stay in your bathrobe because my show is audio only, so I don't even doesn't even matter what you look like, and just talk for 25 minutes to me on a microphone on Skype about topics that you're interested in. Like that was literally in a nutshell, like what my pitch was to like Seth Godin, to Tim Ferriss, to Tony Robbins. That's how I got them all on my show because I just made it very clear of like, you're not risking anything by coming on my show. Like you're risking 25 minutes. You're risking like 2 hours, 3 hours of pain going to a radio station. You're risking 25 minutes while you're sipping your coffee in your own bedroom by coming on my show. So like that was like my pitch. So it wasn't that long ago.
So with that said, where do you think the medium goes, especially with the advent of AI? Is it like just it explodes because every 12-year-old can now compete? Do you think like where do you see it going as a kind of almost like a
I think
social
it
construct?
actually almost implodes because every 12-year-old can compete, everybody fails. Because it's kind of your back to your comment of marketers ruin everything because it's true. Marketers ruin everything. The gold rush of 1849, the gold rushers ruined everything. If just 10 people had just stayed in the woods and just plucked gold nuggets out of the river, they would have crushed it and life, they would have been the richest people in the world and like life would have, but no, a million people had to go fight and die and kill themselves and have absolutely miserable existences so that less than 1% of people could actually come out of there with anything.
Well, and Levi Corporation made more money than all of them, right?
All of
So
them because they were selling the picks and the shovels and the
the
jeans.
the blue jeans, yeah.
And it's been that way ever since. That's just humans. Those were the marketers of 1849. And now marketers ruin everything. So whenever there's an opportunity, they exploit it. Like when I was first podcasting, people were laughing at me, like, why are you wasting time podcasting? Now I don't know a person that doesn't have a podcast. Like I just don't like because they've come in and now we're ruining everything. And of course I'm part of that because I'm ruining everything. I mean, it's just what we do. And, I'm keeping my eyes out for that next thing. So hopefully I can kind of be early on that and I'll be early and then it'll get ruined and we'll move on to the next thing.
So you see the media like that. That's a pretty, especially from you, that take of like you think it implodes on its head, and kind of walk me through. And again, like
Yeah,
you know,
everything's in a cycle. Bitcoin has a 4-year cycle. The market has a cycle with depression, recession. Boom. Everything has a cycle. I mean, what is that behind you? I think that's the Vatican right there. I mean, Rome, had its imperial cycle. I mean, England, had its cycle. Right now the United States is in the middle of its cycle. That'll be over at some point, and then it'll move on to who knows who, and who knows how long. Everything has a cycle. So yeah, it'll not be worth it anymore for people to create content because nobody's paying attention because everybody's doing it. And then it explodes. And then there'll be a couple people, maybe in a couple years, that'll be like, oh, nobody's doing that anymore. And they'll step into that. And all of a sudden it'll be a thing again.
it's a throwback, right? Like the
Yeah.
kids buying vinyl.
Vintage clothes. Yeah.
What is a closing thought for a entrepreneur? And again, my biggest audience are self-employed folks, right? Where I feel that, and again, this is just from speaking to thousands of agents on a regular basis. I just came back from a 4-country tour overseas. It's like you need to be using AI to leverage every process, right? That's the transformation we're living in. That's what's triggering kind of this implosion that you're predicting. But we are also in this attention economy, and it's not changing anytime soon. What does the solopreneur or the small, like the true SMB, probably 3, 5, 10 people, maybe family owned, who's just trying to capture eyeballs to get you to click to go to a funnel, right? Whether it's a product or service program, it's that dog food, right? And I think you nailed it on even the hyper niche, because that's what I advise every entrepreneur. I always say niches run the riches. Like I would never try to compete with a dog collar at Walmart, but like maybe a dog collar for military grade German shepherds has a lot more margins, highly specialized. So what do you tell that entrepreneur who's like, hey, look, it's 2025. I just want to feed my family. What is the most efficient way that I can deploy dollars and time over the next 36 months to get eyeballs?
So here's a quote you can start using that is to that point of the dog collar is a great quote by Seth Godin, which is the problem with the race to the bottom is that you just might win. And who cares about winning the race to the bottom?
That's really good. I like
Because
that.
everybody loses down there. If you're trying to beat Walmart by 1 penny, and then of course they're going to beat you by 1 penny, and then you race to the, everybody loses in that scenario.
Especially when they win on the dog food attached that you don't have.
So the problem with the race to the bottom is that you just might win. That's the problem. So you want to run your race. How do you run your race? Well, you identify that hyper niche that Leo and I have been talking about that you want to become great at. And you realize you don't need everybody in the world. Leo's going to get some of them. I'll get some. And just say, hey, I need 10 people to take this $25,000 offer that is I'm going to kill it for them. And that's me. That's $250,000 a year. Like, you backtrack it. Like, what makes sense for you? And then the beautiful thing is, like, once you get something like that going and it's moving, you find ways to add to that and to do other things and to leverage X and to leverage and to do Y and Z. Like, my income streams have been coming, out of nowhere, over certain things, and some have disappeared along the way as well. Like, that's why you just got to be in the game. So, identify, that big idea, discover that hyper niche within that big idea that you want to be known for. Like, there's a ton of things that within EXP that you can become the person for, that for some reason people like Leo don't think it's worth his time now because he's focused on these things, and you can now focus on this thing. So you don't want to be a pale, weak imitation of Gene or of AJ or of Leo. Be like the true, authentic, genuine version of yourself and just go after that. And you start with that one step. And there's a great quote by Martin Luther King, which is, you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step, but you take the first step. As long as it's in the right direction, then the clouds kind of part a little bit and you might see that next step. And then before you know it, you're like 5 or 6 steps up that staircase. And you're like, wow, this has been quite an unexpected but enjoyable ride. And then, maybe something happens and you fall down a couple steps because that's life, and you get back up and but this time it's easier to get back up to where you were because you've already been there. Like, the process. So that's what I would say. It's all about getting up every day, putting in the reps, but putting the reps in the right direction and the right things.
Well, thank you for all those nuggets. If folks want to look you up and go consume more of your content, what's the best way to do that, John?
Well, I have a daily podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire, where I've now interviewed well over 4,700 entrepreneurs in the past 13 years. I have a fun time just talking with people about their successes, their failures. And of course, I'm always looking to extract their genius for you, the listener. And you can find that Entrepreneurs on Fire. My name's John Lee Dumas. You can search that as well. My website's eofire.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of those nuggets with us today.